Good morning, everybody. Morning. I'm Adam Lupel, Acting President of International Peace Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this interactive dialogue on strengthening gender equality and the inclusion and meaningful participation of women in building peace. As I'm sure you are all aware, we are speaking today on International Women's Day. However, this topic is not a topic that requires a special occasion to highlight. Indeed, it is a central priority of IPI's dedicated program on women, peace, and security, and has been a focus of a multi-year partnership between IPI and the government of Sweden dedicated to women, peace, and leadership. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank Sweden for their support. As you all know, this year, Sweden holds the chair of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, with Minister of Foreign Affairs Linde serving as Chairperson-in-Office. And two key priorities of the Swedish chair are enhancing gender equality and promoting the implementation of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda. And Minister Linde will present these priorities and more to the UN Security Council on Wednesday. In the spirit of the commitment to inclusion, this dialogue then represents the opportunity for members of civil society to provide inputs to that debate as we discuss ways to ensure the meaningful participation of women in building peace. First, we will hear welcoming remarks from the Foreign Minister, and then remarks from Liliana Palihovici, Special Representative of the OSCE to the Chairperson-in-Office on Gender, and Heidi Meinzolt of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Then we will turn to our interactive dialogue with representatives of civil society from the OSCE region. And with that, I will be brief and turn the floor over to the Minister. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you for joining me here today and to IPI for hosting us. I very much look forward to hearing your views on how we can strengthen the Women, Peace and Security agenda in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in cooperation with United Nations. I will listen closely to your messages on peace and security as I prepare to brief the UN Security Council on Wednesday. Strengthening women, peace and security agenda is one of the top priorities during my chairpersonship of the OSCE. Our aim is to mainstream the agenda throughout all our work, both in the policy discussions in Vienna, but more importantly in the field. There can be no sustainable security without gender equality, respect for democratic principle and human rights. These principles and norms will therefore influence our work as chair of the OSCE. We want to work for the meaningful engagement of women and girls in all stages of the conflict cycle in the resolutions and peace building. Women should be part of delegation to peace talks as well as the implementation of peace agreements. Reporting from conflict situations should include gender analysis and sex disaggregated data. Security reform, sector reform should be gender responsive and allow both men and women to contribute. This priority is a continuation of our work as non-permanent member of the UN Security Council in 2017 and 2018. Through Sweden's experience in the Security Council, we know that consistency makes a difference. We need to talk about women's participation and how conflicts affect women, not only at the special meeting, but in all meetings on peace and security. And input from civil society help us to take better decisions. Women's civil society organizations are crucial to increase women's participation in peace processes and better understand how conflict affects the population. We need to know what works and what does not work when implementing women, peace and security in specific context. During my visits to the countries in the OSCE region as a chairperson-in-office, I always meet with civil society organizations to get a broader view and understanding of the current state of play in the country. It was in one of those meetings that I first heard the horrific accounts of the inhuman conditions in a prison camp in the non-government controlled area in Ukraine, the so-called Izolatia, where women were left especially vulnerable. This is an issue that I'm following up. We will also highlight the economic aspects of women, peace and security agenda. If we are to improve women and girls' participation in political processes and in conflict-related processes, economic empowerment will be key. I'm very glad to have Ms. Liliana Palihovici here as my special representative on gender to provide input on these issues. As chairperson-in-office, I also have the support of the OSCE Secretariat and the field missions, who work with the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda daily. I have had excellent discussion with our Secretary-General Helga Schmidt, who shares this priority. As chairperson-in-office, I have established an advisory group on expert on women, peace and security, which will provide additional ideas on how we can strengthen the women, peace and security agenda in the wider OSCE region. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. You said consistency is important, and I want to thank you for your leadership and consistency on this issue. You really paved the way for us. We will now hear further remarks from Liliana Palihovici, Special Representative of the OSCE, to the chairperson. Please,
Thank you.
Liliana.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear Minister Linde, I greet you from Chisinau, and I thank you for the opportunity to discuss with my colleagues and with you about the problems which women are facing, especially those who are doing their best to improve women participation in peace building processes. And certainly this dialogue is of a great importance in terms of promoting gender equality, and will offer us for sure the possibility to create a foundation for our future initiatives in this area. And analyzing the situation in our region, I noticed several worrying signs which would create in close future additional impediments to ensuring gender equality. And I will share with you some of my thoughts, and I will appreciate if you tell me if something like this is happening in your countries and what we can do on this. And my worries, including are connected to the attempts to change the national legislation threatening women's reproductive health in limiting the rights of women to make independent decisions regarding their bodies and health. How we may speak about meaningful participation when such important rights of women are just blocked by political documents, by national legislation. Another issue on which is important to discuss today, the lack of political will to change the power relations in accordance with the international commitments on gender equality. We want to have more women in decisional processes. We want to have more women participating in negotiations for peace. But what we have in reality, yes, we have an increase of percentage of women participating in decision making if we compare for the data in 94 with the data in 2021, but we are far away from the representations which we prefer to have, and the lack of political will is also slowing down our progresses in combating violence against women and deepening other gender inequalities. The messages promoted by some politicians in several countries calling on non-ratification of the Istanbul Convention have raised several concerns. And many of these messages fuel and encourage far-right movements that are constructed around misogynistic ideologies. The alerting pace in the development of such movements is a cause for concern and action. From some consultations or from consultations with NGOs working on women from countries affected by conflicts in Eastern Europe, and at this consultation we have Julia and Gulnara participating also, we came to the conclusion that there is a low response at the regional level. not enough joint action and work on conflict prevention, and women are not sufficiently involved in conflict prevention processes. And here we also need more political will, because we have documents, we have action plans, we have some strategies at the national level, but unfortunately we do not have sufficient will to implement all this documentation or all these policy papers that countries have approved. And I am looking forward to our discussion and to hear from your ideas and experiences and concerns and proposals on how we may contribute to the fact that declarations in a shorter period of time become actions, and the actions which are changing the realities in our countries. And I am also interested to listen to the discussion and your experiences regarding the actions undertaken in each country on the implementation of women, peace and security agenda, and also if you may refer all specifically to how these actions changed or not the level of women participation in decision making and also in peace processes in your countries. Thank you for accepting to participate in this discussion. I am looking forward to your inputs, to your ideas and proposals. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for some of those sobering, worrying signs and good prompt for the conversation. We clearly have a lot to discuss, and the door is very clearly open for your input to the OSCE. We'll turn now to Heidi Meinzolt of the WILPF. Heidi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Minister Linde and also Liliana Palihovici, we are happy and honored that you found the time to listen to us and discuss with women from civil society organizations in the OSCE area before presenting your priorities to the United Nations Security Council. We strongly appreciate Sweden highlighting a feminist approach, women's empowerment and conflict transformation, respecting the women, peace and security agenda. The 8th of March is a highly symbolic day to commemorate that there is still a lot to do to defend women's rights and meaningful participation. In 2021, this is exactly the 100th anniversary of this specific date, the 8th of March. And the International Women's Day was initiated by Clara Zetkin and parts of the women's movement at the beginning of the 20th century. And in 1977, the United Nations declared March 8 as the Day for Women's Rights and World Peace. And this is the combination for which all of us, our working group within the Civic Solidarity Platform and our friends worldwide are in the streets today to demonstrate, to march, and here to discuss online. March 8 is really the moment to express also solidarity with the women who are threatened and suffering from violence, war, and patriarchal dominance. And this year, we issued a statement calling political leaders to action, so-called release from prison women peace builders, prisoners of war, and human rights defenders. And of course, we hope that you will support the statement. And coming now to the participants, we have united here women who don't have really a reason to celebrate achievements, but rather to alert and make visible what has still to be done. So thank you for listening us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that really strong reminder of the significance of this date, March 8th, and the connection between women's rights and world peace. They are intimately related, and a really fundamental reminder for this conversation. So we'll now turn to our interactive dialogue with civil society. I think that it is clear your input is really sincerely being requested to this process, to the OSCE, and so please speak frankly. We will turn first to Tolekan Ismailova of Kyrgyzstan. Tolekan, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Your Excellency, OSCE Chair Anna Linde, and gender unit, which help us during pandemic to organize some webinar together with Heidi Meinzolt and our sisters from working group gender unit and the OSCE. We appreciate your time and efforts for us in difficult time when new risks, challenge and conflicts have dramatically changed the world. I want to give a real obstacle in our region regarding Turkmenistan. This closed country and this against universal human rights, women rights and universal value. And I think we need focus for Turkmenistan women and girls and doctors who died with any support. The Turkmenistan authority do not recognize the existence and the danger of the pandemic, which has been a threat to the health and peace of citizens, especially women, children, and doctors who die in the workplace and at home. Despite the proclamation of ensuring women's rights in marriage and family relations, women in Turkmenistan are deprived of their choice of spouse. Police officers, special service can perform forced genealogical examination of girls as check for Heimlets. The authority forbid women to drive car. Terrible. Due they have no access any information and any participation for decision-making process. Convicts in prisons die without any help. Women in prisons are subjected to moral, psychological, and sexual violence. In order to get a job, it is necessary to have Turkmen surname. If there is a business for women or non-titled nation, the business is taken away by the state, or they under pressure or go to prison. And focusing for Kyrgyzstan, we have from October last year this I don't know, this revolution, or I don't know, but new government started constitutional reform. And Your Excellency, Chair, dear Anna Linde, please focus for Kyrgyzstan authority, because we don't have a real constitutional reform, because all these fair, transparent principle OSCE and UN violated, and Parliament focus to push this constitutional reform without equal participation, women, girls, and public in Kyrgyzstan. And I think this time to adapt Venice principle and demand our government to follow this the obligation under OSCE and UN. And impunity, this one is a problem. As you know, this after tragic event 2010 on June, when national minority was under pressure, died, and as you know, our partner, human rights defenders, Askarov died in prison 47 on July last year. But today we don't receive, together with his family, any information about why he died, because it was a real violation, because they don't receive any medical support from independent doctors. And regarding mass media freedom, when we follow in a court hearing, or when we defend victims of sexual or psychological violation from men, we don't have real support from mass media. And mass media was under pressure, and I think this time to demand regarding gender equality include freedom of mass media. Women and children and vulnerable groups have suffered, is according to UN Women Central Asia, the death rate in childbirth is 30 times higher in Kyrgyzstan than in Belarus. It's official, database. But during pandemic, it was very interesting, because our government go to holidays and don't give attention to our situation during pandemic. And that's why we have a lot of died doctors and citizens. And I described some how this religious fundamentalism seeks to gain power and resource using religion or culture as an excuse. I sent our presentation. We don't have time. That's why I hope you will read our report, how this research show that religious fundamentalism affects spheres such as society, family, politics, and religious fundamentalism encourages various forms of violence. Those are usual intimidation, pressure, defamation in the eyes of society, common domestic violence and sexual violence. And another dangerous issue is climate change and risk disaster in Central Asia, include Kyrgyzstan. As you know, after Soviet Union, we have 92 uranium places. One is the uranium place Meinzolt, include to 10 dangerous places in the world. And finally, I want to say, when you will be in UN Security Council, I hope we need attention to Sendai framework for disaster risk and reduction, because it's include for CDG's value and principle, another OSCE partnership principle. Without gender equality, without gender justice and participation, we don't receive any good impact for this issue. Please give attention. And finally, I want to give recommendation, strengthen the full parity, partnership and collaboration of OSCE mechanism for the new action plan to promote the principle of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on gender equality, to update the national action plan in several countries, including Central Asia, and coordinate implementation by an independent panel of evaluators, because without evaluation, we don't see any indicators, include Kyrgyzstan. Adapt to the national action plan to combat corruption, because corruption everywhere, to UN Convention Against Corruption and combat money laundering in these transit countries such Kyrgyzstan. Localized, taking into account new risks, conflicts and disasters, including pandemic, climate change, inequality and discrimination in business, in politics. As you know, we have special rapporteur in UN which focus for business and human rights. We need to adapt and give more window to real women participation to promote this principle. And also, when we have this shrinking space, we need focus and we need localization, UN, OSCE, EU guidelines on human rights defenders. And I hope, dear Chairman, we need to adopt declaration recognizing the role of women rights defenders, ecological human rights activists in Central Asia countries. And finally, promote constitutional reform and help us promote constitutional reform in the Kyrgyzstan based on UN and OSCE principle and standards. And as one is a key guiding principle from the 10 Helsinki Final Act, is recognized by countries in the OSCE region, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of soul, conscience, and belief, the equal participation of women and girls in decision-making with horizontal leadership and participatory process at all levels of government will enable the restoration of sustainable peace, development, and security. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You covered a lot of ground there, but I think that that is actually an example of why gender equality is such a comprehensive issue that cuts across all of the agendas, and why women's participation is so important on all of these issues. We do have to keep our eyes on the time. We've only just got about 35 minutes left, so I do implore everyone to try to keep their remarks brief so we have the opportunity for the foreign minister to respond. We're going to take two more interventions from civil society and then go back to the minister if she wants to have some brief remarks before we then go on for the last two interventions. So now we will turn to Gulnara Shahinian of Armenia. Please, Gulnara, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much for this discussion, and I hope this will become a tradition, discussing very important issues with civil society and taking it to the discussion on the highest level. Thank you. I'm coming from Armenia, and I'm chair of Democracy Today NGO, which has been started just with independence in Armenia. Our idea was to promote democracy and rule of law in Armenia. But unfortunately, being situated geographically, geopolitically in a space surrounded by authoritarian regimes, it was not very easy to protect democracy. And this last war demonstrated this, that of course democracy is all under the danger. If you want to go to take the other way, to turn the other direction, you are in danger. So for many years, we're working in this building, and we even promote idea, and I would like to share with you of having special advisory group to the Minsk group to discuss issues on women, peace and security. And this has been discussed with the ambassador of Sweden in Armenia and was taken. And I think that if we took this issue at that time, we might have been our word to say, and we might change maybe we'll be able to change the route that the war has taken. Women has been very active throughout this time, taking, as you always, they're saying that the countries which have tradition of women's movement, they are more democratic. Armenia had this centenary of women's movement, and women have been always at the forefront of movement for democracy, like it was during Velvet Revolution. And even during this war, they changed the way they have been working. They did a traditional work, but also many of them, stand next to their men in order to protect the country. This was not a militaristic issue. This was a survival issue. As tiny Armenia was to stand against mercenaries and against big armies. So this was for us, a really issue of existence. Another issue which I would like you to raise and take you with you to Security Council is the peacekeeping forces that has been established, that have been brought in one night to Armenia without clear definition who these peacekeepers are, how they are going to work. And we don't know their mandate. We do not know their code of conduct. We always hear that they are bringing food, they are bringing construction materials, they are demining, but what is their role? And the steps that have been taken are already dangerous because they're already under pressure of Russian government. They already introduced Russian languages as a language equal to Armenian, which gives a lot of concerns. And another issue which is also concerning to us is peacekeeping forces are there, but there is no mechanism of protection of people. If there will be violation of women's rights, where they're going to comply? The Turkish-Russian monitoring team, whom they are going to address their issues? This is an issue of real concern, and we want, these issues to be discussed. First of all, what was what is the status of the peacekeeping forces, and why Minsk Group, which is established, format for discussing the, resolution of conflict, is not there, has been replaced or has not been replaced by this by Russia. This is an issue of concern, and also situation of women at the border. We're now trying to do assessment because borders have been extended, and we have their peacekeepers. Again, we don't know their role, and they're also our Armenian army. How these women are protected, what conditions for protection are, because the war has been also not only on these borders in, with Nagorno-Karabakh, but also in other regions of Armenia. So these borders are also under pressure. So these are issues that are of our concerns, and I would like you to take the issue of the protection of people and in this condition of the peacekeeping forces, how the people are protected, what the mechanisms are existing. Another issue which is also concerning to us, and where there is, absence of consideration of people's interest in making this peace agreement. The peace agreement reminds us always like something grabbing land. Those who stood here, they grabbed this part of the land, they are standing here. And the others will, the others will stay where they are. So which means it's like a medieval power, where the more force you have, the more you can grab. But where are people here? Where are people's rights? Where are women's rights? So these issues have not been discussed, and these issues continue to be raised more and more in the country, and people are very much concerned. And women have been raising this issue. Another very important issue, again, which is related to situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, this country have been for 20 years unrecognized. And people have a certain, very strange status, which is strange for me because under international law, we're all equal. Universal Declaration of Women's Human Rights says about equality, but these people didn't have an equal status. They were unrecognized. And when the war started, even the agencies, which are like UN and other agencies, didn't find definition to protect them. So these people being unprotected during all of these years, isolated, even during the war, the women didn't have, possibility to be protected. And they were doing demonstrations before UN and before raising issues at the stage. I think I am already exhausting my time, but I would like you to take all of these issues to the discussion at the Security Council, because these are really important for us. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much. Very compelling issues, and I could listen to you for much longer, but we are short on time, so we'll need to move on. But thank you so much for your intervention. Again, keeping our eye on the time, we'll move on to Julia Kharashvili of Georgia, and then we will return to the Foreign Minute for some brief responses, and then we'll hear from Belarus and Ukraine. Please, Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, and I will try to go by bullets to economic time. And you know that in our region, conflict and post-conflict situation really changed gender roles in very traditional societies originally, especially in IDP communities, when women became main breadwinners due to loss of men, due to migration of men, due to some other things, but they were not seen as equal to participate for public participation and for involvement in politics. Slowly women started to gain their position, at least in civil society, and resolution now gives us some opportunities to be, but still not enough. In Eastern Partnership region, in 5 from 6 countries, we have conflicts. 1 year ago, I will say protracted conflicts, and very unfortunately, we have almost hot conflict in our region, and we had not only protracted displacement now, but also newly displaced women, and we have this combination of different flows of displaced people, which makes very difficult, as Gulnara mentioned, also for international aid agencies to navigate and to understand what and how can be done. And here consultations with women who in all these countries have enough experience, courage, and opportunity already to talk, to advise, to share, and to do. The main is to do. I thank very much Chairperson of OSCE, Mrs. Linde, for strengthening point of economic empowerment of women. I tried to prepare for today, and I was consulted with my colleagues from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, and from, of course, our grassroots women. And when we were talking about resilience and about human security, on the first, which are the key for women now after COVID and during protracted conflicts. And all times it comes to 2 issues, participation and economic empowerment, and also protection. Protection is extremely important, and I tried to formulate it in UN language. I simply will send this quote, not to spend on this time. What I really wanted to say is that talking with UN, it is possible to quote global study on 1325, which told that resolution 1325 is a human rights mandate, and it means that women who are trying to build peace on the ground, they are human rights defenders, and they need protections as human rights defenders. We always repeat and repeat it, and we could not achieve it. I'm coming now from women's section. Today, we also had actions because we tried to push our government to make more strong legislations against sexual violence on children, on minors, which we had recently few cases and where we really demand that government will react and will do a real normal legislation. So I think all these issues in our region are very similar. And of course, we all see importance of work of women together. And we think that if OSCE will take leading role, like intergovernmental, but also inter-women organization, working for security with women and for women, because it's our hope that such organization can somehow support unity of women in region. We think that it is very important, and it's also one of the messages. Now, when we have everything online, when women do not have access to technologies, we need special measures to empower women and to give them this opportunity. Not to take time, I will send the quote which we prepared about responsibilities of states to ensure women's participation. And what is the main, that women's voice will be not only heard, but will make impact. Without this, meaningful participation is not possible. Thank you very much. And to all my colleagues, happy Women's Day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing that broader regional perspective. Participation, protection, and economic empowerment are issues important to women all across the region, and sort of is a good segue to turn back to the Foreign Minister and Chairperson-in-Office for any comments you'd like to make, Foreign Minister, on these interventions before we turn to the next. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very valuable proposal and insight. Just a few comments on what you said. First, when Liliana is pointing at the lack of political will, I think that's one of the main issues, because you can see now that there is a backlash on gender in several organizations, in UN, in EU, in OSCE. And turning here to what also Ismailova said about update national action plans of 1325, both of those, your intervention also shows that the ministerial resolutions that was about to be adopted in Tirana, two were actually vetoed. It was the one about implementing the 1325 UN resolution in OSCE work that was vetoed, and also to give more gender balance to the panels in OSCE who are actually deciding who should get the the post, and as head of missions and head of the OSCE secretariats and everything like that. That was also vetoed. So it's a lack of political will, and also what Ismailova said of impunity. I think it's one of the most important issue, that not the least the gender-based violence in conflicts are often afterwards left with impunity, and that's absolutely not accepted, and that goes into what Gulnara said about the peacekeeping forces and the mandates and roles of peacekeepers. And I think it's extremely important that we have women in all parts of the conflict cycle, and we know from research that if you have women in all parts of the conflict cycle, and women sitting at the negotiation table of peace agreements, the peace agreements will be more sustainable. And you can also see that women have other contact points in a society, meaning that they talk with others, they are bearer of a peace agreement in a way that men are not. And we can also see that here the issue coming back again to impunity and peace agreements, that if you have women on the table and before, you get also gender-based violence and taking responsibility for that in the agreement. If you don't have women, it's much more seldom that this is seen as part of the conflict. It's seen as normal sexual violence, and they don't take responsibility for actually using gender-based violence as a weapon, sometimes even a weapon of mass destruction in conflicts. So that's why it's so extremely important to have women to participate, and that was what Julia was also saying, to have participation of women, because otherwise there is a big lack of inputs in the work. And the economic empowerment, I will actually, after this meeting, and that's why I have to leave exactly at 4 o'clock sharp, I will have a meeting preparing now Swedish leadership in the Economic Empowerment Action Coalition in United Nations, which we have together with Spain, Mexico, Germany, and some other countries, where we will work with economic empowerment, equality in the labor market, social security systems for women, child care, elderly care, and all those issues. And Julia also mentioned COVID, and I don't know if you have seen it, but Secretary General Guterres has had an article in many international papers today where he's saying COVID has a woman's face. And that is actually very much so. And here I just have to say that the women's network of foreign ministers, we managed to get through a resolution in the United Nations about a special gender perspective on COVID, which we discussed and then worked through in the Foreign Ministers Women Network. So I stay by that to be able to have time to listen to the other participants. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. As mentioned, we do have a hard end, so we'll move on. We want to be sure to get our colleagues in from Belarus and Ukraine, so I'll turn straight away to Maryna Korzh of Belarus. Please, Maryna, the floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you for having me here. I'll brief you shortly on what is happening now in Belarus. And as you know, of course, what has started in Belarus started with the COVID, actually, when the government did not impose any sort of measures or quarantine. And so actually, we don't have the figures on domestic violence, for example, as in other countries, because the worldwide and also the regional statistics shows that women and the domestic violence against women increased by 30% in most of the countries. In Belarus, we are not able to track these consequences and numbers because there was never quarantine or anything. So actually everything is working as it was working before. But unfortunately now the COVID situation is influencing a lot other spheres. I'll briefly mention what is happening. And of course, also based on what was happening on how the the presidential election campaign was carried out, we have lots of issues now, and especially how we call it now, we call it the legal default, because none of the laws are working, especially all the laws which are related to the peaceful assembly, for example. So nothing is actually working, and all the laws that we have are used against people. What is happening in terms of women? Of course, women were the face of the revolution, and this is what is still happening, even though the protests are not so active because of winter, and because also people are quite, how do you call it, depressed, yes, because Lots of them were arrested. After the day of elections, around 30,000 people, they were arrested, they were put to jail, they were tortured, and there was quite a big number of women, yes, that were tortured. And we have also documented, and me personally, I was working as documenter of torture and violence against women who were in prisons within the first 3 days after the elections. And unfortunately now women are speaking out loud about the cases, but we had sexual abuse, we had harassment, and we had quite severe cases there. What I have to say is also that 0 criminal cases or investigation processes are started. So actually none of the riot police members or people who are working in prison, they're actually to blame. So we are not even sure if at the moment there will be any sort of punishment for the people who are committing the crimes. For the moment, we have 270 political prisoners. Out of them, we have 38 women who are recognized as political prisoners, and 141 politically motivated criminal cases against women in Belarus. So also like 49 women are now, for example, in the places of detention, or they're under the house arrest, and 10 women already were sentenced to real terms of imprisonment. For example, 2 weeks ago, 2 journalists that were covering the protests, they were sent to jail for 2 years just for streaming what was happening in the streets. So we have to say that the situation is quite threatening, and in these terms, of course, gender equality was put aside, and we don't know what priority number is this now on the agenda of the state representatives. But of course, civil society organizations are alarming and talking a lot about gender equality still, because we think that what we see in the streets especially is very much connected with domestic violence and generally violence in society, because the measures were never taken properly against domestic violence, and we don't have the law on counteracting domestic violence, and even more, government was against having this sort of law. So we see lots of connection with what happened and how this violence actually came to the streets. And what is happening now is the huge suppression of any sort of peaceful meetings, and especially when women are now going to the streets or doing anything politically actively, they're prosecuted. And the weapon that is used now is, for example, threatening women that the kids will be taken away from them if they're politically active. And also one of the women's human rights organization was claimed to be organizing women's marches, and they all had to run away from the country. So now they're not able to provide support to women who are facing discrimination in Belarus. And yeah, so in this sort of situation, it's very hard to say what to do. Also, a few days ago, the Human Rights Defenders Center Vesna, which is helping political prisoners, both men and women, the prosecution started. So they are under criminal case, as we understand, and the Human Rights Defenders, so they had to run away from the country. So now it's not very clear who is going to support people inside of the country. Of course, there are still lots of civil society organizations working and struggling, but all of us, especially people who are in Belarus, are under pressure. Thank you. Would be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that very stark briefing of, as you say, a threatening situation in Belarus. And I just want to hope for your personal safety and security as you continue this brave work. We'll now turn to hear from Ukraine, Nina Potarska. Nina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for opportunity to speak on high level. Mm-hmm. And I've just returned from the Women March, and where we again demand the ratification of Istanbul Convention, which has not been ratified. And in addition, we have raised the issue of 1325 implementation, and the issue of security should be extended to the concept from the military security to human security. Since the implementation of 1325, unfortunately, has priority over military security. And while the state primarily concerned the security and defense and the needs of community, and especially women in community, related to day-to-day security, remain invisible. And we draw attention to the issue of support women, of women peace builders, and women who join the work, the women peace and security agenda. And it's important to recognize their role and create security space for those who promote culture of peace and non-violence in the communication in their area, in their community. And the stigmatization of dialogue between the parties, and it's also exists, and the lack of the safe space for the dialogue. We are also looking for this opportunity to find this safe place through this dialogue between civil society and even the just citizens, from government control and non-government control. And also I want to raise the question of equality before the law for citizens from non-government controlled territories. And because they are not equal in their social benefits and pension care and so on. And even they have still have problems to reach government controlled territories and the recognition of the documents, not all, but documents from non-government control. This also make many issues for the citizens and for women also, and prevent the other number of issues related to the far rights, and they prevent state funding for far rights and other organizations which promote violence against sexual, gender, ethnic or religions, language, and other we will also draw attention to the fact of the police do not properly investigate the crimes based on the intolerance toward these groups. And in addition, we already have enough of evidence of cooperation between the police and security service and far right groups which are controlled by the police, and these cases from these groups never investigate, and I say that the people greet each other and coordinate the actions together, and we have enough of evidence about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that view from Ukraine. I think your last point, I think, resonates with the numbers of others on accountability, that there is a real need for increased accountability for all of these on all these actions and crimes. We will now turn back to the Foreign Minister and Chairperson-in-Office for any final comments and concluding remarks. We've got about 5-6 minutes. So back to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear also what Maryna and Nina is saying from what's happening in Belarus and Ukraine. And in Belarus, of course, it's remarkable what the women has been doing in the whole since August, since the not free and fair election, and how women have been able to to keep up the spirit even in the worst of times. And that you now see that the police and the different kind of acting police forces are punishing women severely. And this is also what you see in several conflict areas, that you punish women because you punish also the men by punishing the women. And also threatening to take the children away, as you are saying, is also, of course, something that the forces know it's very damaging, and that also what Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, whom I met here in Stockholm and also in Brussels, said that when they threatened to take her children, she decided she had to go and see them, because that was a price that she could not pay. And what I think Nina brings up is the Istanbul Convention, and that is actually a problem now in several countries, that it's not ratified. And even if government has decided that the country should adhere to the Istanbul Convention, which is against domestic violence and those important issues, then if there is no ratification, they cannot held accountable. So it's kind of get the applause from other government that you say that you should follow the Istanbul Convention, but as long as it's not ratified, there is impunity. So that's why this is a very important issue to bring up. I think it's interesting to hear what Nina said about the people in the non-governmental control areas and the safe space for dialogue. And we know in several countries, in Georgia, in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh, in Ukraine with Donetsk and Luhansk, Georgia with South Ossetia and Abkhazia, the discussion on what kind of relation you should have with those areas, as well as in Liliana's Moldova, where you have Transnistria, is a very, very important issue, and very diverging views on what is best and what is not best. And I know, for example, when we discuss with women organization in Georgia, and you were there, Julia, when we had the meeting, there was some witness that there was a lot of contacts between women, for example, but that was not possible to be very open about it, or also because it's in the big geopolitical game, so to speak. That would have been not maybe the politically correct thing to do. And also the question on then that women does not, as you say, Nina, get their pensions or social security, because if you have the total openness and dialogue and giving the rights, then it's kind of, are you then giving in to a situation that you are not accepting? Meaning that those people are kind of being stuck in the middle and has to pay a very heavy price for it. So, and by that I would say I thank you all for sharing your thoughts, very valuable for me in preparation for my intervention and discussions in the Security Council. I've got 2 hours there, so I guess there will be a lot of questions and possibilities to discuss with the Security Council. So by that, I hope to continue to have a dialogue, and Liliana is my personal representative on gender, so I hope that you can keep the contact with her. Julia is also a member of my special advisory group on women, peace and security, so please keep in touch with both Liliana and Julia for any other input. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Hey, thank you so much. Gulnara started this with saying she hopes this is a tradition. I share that sentiment. I hope we can do this again next year or soon. This has really been wonderful. Thank you all so much.